Hi everyone, welcome. This is my first video. I'm heaps nervous. I just have something I need to share, and we're in a window of opportunity right now, and it's really time to share because the window's small. The conversation that I want to open up is a conversation around health. And some of the current ideas that we have around health and how they are not so well supporting our highest intentions. And I'd like to point to some of the reasons why. So a bit of my background. I am I'm a healer born from necessity. I took myself into a chronic state of degeneration, and then over the course of the last, well, I guess it's been 10, 15 years, but really actually found a good way about 5 years ago, and really turned my life around from being medicated, chronically inflamed and degenerated, and labeled with a heap of diagnosis. And I decided to try something different. And what we've been told is that we get a disease, we have symptoms for a while. So this is what happened for me. I had symptoms. I got the symptoms medicated. My mum was a medical receptionist. So I got my inflammation dealt with anti-inflammatories. I got my spasms dealt with muscle relaxants, Valium, and I had my pain dealt with through painkillers. At the time, I was also right into gym and bodybuilding, and doing all the protein shakes and all the nutrition and steaks and rice and broccoli and all them things every day. Basically, I took myself into a state of degeneration, and I thought I knew. I thought my education that I'd paid for was right, So it was like a sort of hard pill to swallow, but I really had to sort of just empty my cup and sort of let this come in. And it's really changed my life. So what I'd like to do is just open up a conversation that isn't based in this kind of being a victim mentality, where it's just our body starts to stop working, symptoms happen, we get medication, and then one day we've got a disease, or we've got cancer, and we just have to go through the process, and no one really knows why, but it just happens. Seems like some people are doing different things with their lifestyles, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so I just want to open up a conversation around around that. Okay, so what I discovered in 2015 when I come to Bali for my first fast, I met a woman who was supposed to be dead with multiple sclerosis. And she started telling me about this guy, Dr. Morse. I was really resistant at the start. I was following this protocol written by a doctor named Dr. Alejandro Younger. He wrote a book called Clean. It was 300 pages of where toxins come from. And then there's 3 pages at the end that was an organic juice fast. And I was like, oh wow, this is a cardiologist, a world-renowned heart surgeon, who is basically sort of put together what I almost put together. And he's a doctor and he knows, and he's saying, do this. So let's try this. So I found my way to Bali, and I was doing this fast, and I just felt like my liver was going to explode. I'd been really toxic. I'd been medication. I'd been self-medicating with all sorts of recreationals. Once I'd given up on the whole health journey and coming back to full organic paleo blood type diet, and just plateauing but still being medication dependent. I was following this guy, just Dr. Alejandro Younger, and I met this woman. Her name was Nita Taylor, and she told me about a guy named Dr. Morse, and how basically she had been written off as being dead in 2 years, and she'd be in a wheelchair within a year. And then she found this guy, Dr. Morse. That was from 5 UK doctors, all said exactly the same thing. And she found this guy, Dr. Morse, and basically we met out the front of a yoga class, and she was fit and vibrant and healthy and telling me this. And I was still arguing, saying, no, what about your protein? What about sugar? Rah, rah. And anyway, so I just really had to just empty my cup and let this new understanding come in. And when I did, it just completely liberated my life. So I'd like to touch on that. So basically, we stopped talking about disease and symptomology and any of the C word. We don't talk about any of that because we're not allowed to talk about any of that. You're not allowed to talk about, you can't treat, diagnose, or cure anything, because all of those things are owned. And if you start doing any of those things, because they're all patented and they're not getting the medication that's prescribed to them, then you can get in a lot of trouble. So you don't you don't talk about any of that because it's actually like not truth. And there's no cure for any of it anyway. There's only treatments because it's meant to treat, to cultivate to a further part of chronic disease. So it's a business model that slowly unwinds your health and milks you, right? And then it just has you on this endless merry-go-round all your life, bouncing from doctors to naturopaths to massages to like acupuncture or chiropractors. Like you just keep bouncing around to all of these therapies because you're never really like being told what is underlying like the entire process. So sorry, I just got stuck looking at me then for a second. Looking at you guys. So what I want to do is open up a conversation on cellular health. And so cellular health is like, it's at the core of it all. Like if we stop like treating the body differently, start saying that the skin's different from the eyes, different from the brains, different from the livers, different from the hearts, different from the nerves, different, like at the core of it, everything's just a cell, and cells all function in a similar fashion. You know, they function in a similar fashion, and they all reliant on the same things for the most part. If we want to just be very, very simple about it, we don't need to overcomplicate it. Like biochemists, even at a certain point, it's all guesswork. It's all theories. They don't actually understand what happens in the quantum world. They don't actually understand what happens with the energy of things. They're just kind of guessing, and they do things and like, oh, we see this happen, so maybe that means this, and it's just like, they're guessing too, right? So if we just like zoom out a little bit, like instead of being right down in it, and just kind of zoom out and go, oh, what's going on with the cell? Okay, so every cell is like, it's floating in an interstitial fluid. I don't know if it's the best analogy, but you could think of it like about some Fruit Loops, maybe floating in a bowl of water rather than milk, because milk doesn't really support cellular function. So all these little Fruit Loops floating around inside this bowl of water, right? And so that fluid in between all the Fruit Loops is what they call interstitial fluid, right? So this is like beyond the veins and the capillaries, and this is actually moving into the tissue where all of these cells are now living, and they're breathing, and they're eating. They're eating the blood, and they're they're going to the toilet, into the lymphatic system. They're just like little engines or little houses, right? So they're eating in the kitchen, and then they're going to the toilet, right? That's how cells work. And then there's the lights. There's also the nervous system, right? Which is really important. We've got to have the lights on for it all to work properly. So when we just turn our attention to the nature of the cell and go, oh, okay, so how do we support cellular function? And like at the core of that, there's like 4 pillars. It's like, how are we supporting digestion, absorption, utilization, and communication? Elimination. There's 5. Communication is important. We'll get to that after, right? So like it's all intertwined. But when we start to turn our attention towards cellular function, and we start to remove the cellular waste that's actually inhibiting those factors, then we start to reverse what we've created. And like the current paradigm has us believing that like, oh, we did it, and that's got us living in this freaking shame and this guilt of these poor decisions that we made in the past, or these things that I shouldn't have taken, or this like things that I shouldn't have done, or this accident that I had. And don't get me wrong, physical trauma is real, but so is like a real deep healing process that can unravel the scar tissue and stuff that's obstructing tissue function. That's another conversation. So where did I go with that? Yeah, so we're basically talking about like talking to the cellular health. And if we just want to make it very, very simple, we've got a cell floating around in that bowl of Fruit Loops, and what happens is that water starts to get dirty. And it's not so much the blood, because if the blood was like bad, if the blood was bad, we'd die. We can't have bad blood. So this is the kind of the half truth that they're pitching us around the alkaline acid dominance. It's like, oh, you can't have acidic blood because it doesn't work. That's exactly right. It doesn't work. But you can have an acidic lymphatic situation. And what that does is, when you like that bowl with all the little like Fruit Loops floating around it, when all of that fluid in between starts to become acidic, your body has to try and neutralize that in one way. And so what happens is, in an ideal world, our body would make, our adrenals would make steroids. And steroids are our go-to when we're looking for cellular support and our major antacid. Our steroids are how we deal with that, yeah? And our corticosteroids as well through mineral utilization. But what happens is because we're all stuck in this stress response, we're all stuck in survival mode, we're all stuck in scarcity, we're all stuck in fear. We are like stimulating ourselves because we're exhausted, we're taking coffee, we're eating lots and lots of red meat because there's lots of neurotransmitters available in red meat and that can support our body. If we're in such a degenerative state where our own body's not making those things, we're having alcohol, we're having sugar, everyone's like in the new age movements having like cacao all the time, like they're all stimulants, yeah? And so they're not giving us a true energy, they're giving us a false sense of energy. And so what happens is when we're getting this false sense of energy and we think that's actually of our vitality, when to the truth of it, we're stuck in this fight or flight response, our body can't make those steroids and it can't make the corticosteroids. And like, sorry if I'm like losing you here, but like the simplicity of it is right. So when those steroids aren't being made, then the body's got three mechanisms where it can support the homeostasis of the interstitial spaces. So to make that bowl of Fruit Loops, for all that water to be at a pH neutral that's supporting cellular function, well, within reason, because charge is what moves all chemistry. So there needs to be some charge, but when we start moving too far either way, then we start to see damage and overcompensation, holding patterns, degeneration, dysfunction in hormones, all of these different things, right? That's what's going on. And so what we do, what our body does, it can either pull water into that space. That's what they call edema. So your body just pulls all this extra water. You'll see like people, if they've got thyroid issues, they'll have these big fucking turkey, sorry for swearing, or have those like big turkey necks, and there'll be like edema in here. You see like old fellas like drinking beer all the time. They got this big like beer guts all the time because it's like their organs are so acidic and toxic that their body's pulling water into that space, just like you would dilute a bucket of water. Like if you were washing the floors with vinegar, right? You just like, you put a little bit of vinegar in, you put a little bit of water in, and then the acid's not too hot and it doesn't ruin things, right? In the same way, your body can do that. And like at the core of it, that's what the majority of what hypertrophy is sold as in gym workouts. The majority of people, and the reason that they lose their gains is because they're just holding heaps of water weight because their muscles are so acidic. They're trying to hold all this extra water. That's why you can see the strength of a powerlifter and the strength of a bodybuilder can be the same. And in fact, the powerlifter will go longer because he's not an acidic tipping point where his lactic acid is going to actually completely obstruct his whole energy metabolism, and he's going to be exhausted really quickly. Sorry, there's a tangent. So we can use water. We can use water to pull into the space to bring in homeostasis. We can also use fat. And so this is what you see like with the short-term results that people are getting in ketogenic diets. Like if you and like how you seeing people eating coconut oil all the time, or even overdoing like heaps of like even hemp oil and these kinds of things, like any oil. What's the other one? Black sesame seed oil, like that Ayurvedic people are all about, which is great. Like don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like you can't use oils, because that lymphatic system, that fluid, 80% of that fluid in the interstitial fluid is a lipid-based system. It's set up as a lipid-based system because fats, sorry, I keep looking down there, I look at you guys, because fats are alkaline in nature and they can buffer cellular waste. So if your body's making like carbonic or nitric or lactic acids just from daily metabolic processes, it goes into a little oil buffering system, and then that acid can then be transported away and removed through the kidneys, hopefully, or through the skin or through the bowels. There are exit points. So you can use fat, but if that's like an actual solution, if that's a solution like to doing it all the time, like that's what you're depending on because your adrenals are down, because you're stuck in fight or flight and you're like eating stimulating foods all the time, then has anyone seen like a Scotch fillet, right? So Scotch fillet is like thought of as a really nice piece of meat. I used to smash heaps of Scotch fillets because I used to be right into bodybuilding, and it's got all the marbling all through it. And so I'm sure a lot of you've seen it, but there's fat in the meat. And when there's lots of fat in the meat, generally that's because that was an area of the body that was being used a lot. There was a lot of metabolic action, but maybe not necessarily a lot of flow, right? There's a lot of metabolic action, but yeah, there wasn't like moving through there. So what the body does is it lays fats down in those places to buffer those cellular acids. Yeah, and so what this idea of living on fat is pushing people towards when they're living acidic lifestyles is just this great big Scotch fillet. And they're just going to be full of all this fat plaquing, which eventually, I don't know if you've ever seen a piece of meat when you find a tumor in there and you see it's all like surrounded in fat and then there's a tumor inside it. It's like, it's what's going on with like these growths and these cysts and these boils that are below the surface but that can't escape. And then you get a cell in there that like can't like get out and it can't go to the toilet outside itself. And then you see a mutation in the mitochondria and the nucleus, and it's like it just starts replicating when it should be dying, and then they call it another name, and then they give you all these acids on top of that. They give you battery acid, which is crazy. It's a 1.5 pH acid. I probably shouldn't actually say what I'm talking about, so I'm going to move on from that. The third way that you can use, your cells can use as a defense mechanism against cellular attack, basically, when the fluid surrounding the cell starts becoming acidic in nature and it's trying to leach an electron from somewhere to try and find homeostasis. And like everything's getting stuck together and dehydrated. I'm sure you've seen those blood samples where you see all the blood's all stuck together, and you know, like it's the same all throughout tissue. It's what's happening. Everything's getting stuck and dehydrated and glomulated and not functioning properly. Like if things need to move, you need to be able to move properly to like be able to express properly. You know, like you need to be free and not adhered like scar tissue, like a uterine wall to a to a bowel, because it's welded there, and that's what endometriosis is. You know, like it's just anyway. So the other thing that your body can use is something called the calcium buffering mechanism. So your body can say, all cells have a structural component of calcium that gives it its structural integrity, and it's essential. You see it more in bones because bones are more tightly packed together, right? And so what your body can do is from those calcium sources, it can like go, here you go, just have a little brick from my wall. Like you got this like strong cell, you know, like he's a strong cell, and then he just starts giving bricks away, and then eventually starts to get floppy. You get a floppy cell. And so then we see these floppy cells, and so we've lost structural integrity. So we're talking about, if we're going to talk about symptomology, if we're going to take it down the realms of what the medical system like to talk about it is, then we would talk about herniations, we would talk about aneurysms, we would talk about prolapses, we would talk about, and this is like a big one, why you see prolapses in women after birth, because they're breastfeeding. They don't know they can't utilize their calcium because their body's not working so well. Their parathyroid's not up, so they can't replace the calcium that they're given to the baby. So then they leach calcium from themselves to supply the baby, because it's actually more important to keep the next generation going. There's another tangent. It could be scoliosis. It could be brittle hair, it could be brittle nails, it could be sagging skin. There's hernia, prolapses, prolapsed disc, herniations. Well, you get the point, right? So tissue starts to degenerate, and it gets floppy, and it doesn't work. And then we're in inflammation. Well, the inflammation's happening, and then we start to see the spasticity, and then we see the loss of the structure, and it moves from the itis into the osis, into the degeneration. And they've got you, right? They've just medicated you with the anti-inflammatories and the painkillers and the muscle relaxants until your body is really not so happy. It's not so happy. And then you become a client for life, because it's a business model, and you've got to keep buying the same medication. And then eventually they're going to sell you some surgery, some butchery, which, don't get me wrong, can save lives and it can give people amazing relief. But the fact is, they were cultivated for 20 years to get to that place, to then be able to practice on us, cutting us up when it was never really required in the first place. If we had just been given better information, more in line with our intention to be well. So then you become a customer, and then we're paying for a freaking fake knee, or like a fake shoulder, or and they get to play with the whole, how are we going to make these bionic humans, right? Anyway, so moving on from that point. what I so all of that pain and suffering comes from that ridiculous idea that we just get symptoms and we just like persevere with them, and then we get some medication if we have them, but we don't actually listen to the body that's actually trying to speak to us. And so what I would like to like there's a possibility I like to speak the possibility is where like actually when your body starts speaking to you, when you start experiencing symptomology, you're actually like getting communications from your body that there's a tissue issue, which is a tissue issue. There's also a nervous system. There could be a nervous system issue. Like that tissue issue is basically founded in the fact that there's a lymphatic issue. And so what? Okay, it's always lymphatic issue to the most part when we're talking with regards to cellular waste. So when we talk about lymphatic system, we're talking about our immune system. So we're talking about bacteria and fungus and parasites and internal and external toxins. So we're talking about all of the external shit that they're putting in, that is in all of our shit, in our food, in our water, in our air, in our cleaning materials, all these inorganic compounds that all have some kind of crazy like effect on cellular function, and like just sticking to all these cells, and the cells can't see properly and they can't communicate and they can't absorb anything. There's all this shit sticking to them. So then the cells are shitting themselves and then they're like causing more inflammation. Oh God. All right, so it's my first video, and I'm just trying to let this like truth like just really come through in a really pure way, and hopefully a way that you can understand it. So yeah. So that's all of our pain. All of our pain is over there. All of our pain is over there with that old way of looking at it. But like there's this beautiful way where we just start to think like, actually, my cells are communicating with me. They are so intelligent. If I just like learn to listen and like learn to support them through a process, like for example, like say like it's like your nose is running and they want to call it hay fever, or they want to call it sinusitis, or whatever they want to call it. So what would be causing that? What can cause that? There's only one thing that can cause that, because you just got cells in a bowl of Fruit Loops, and it's like, what is the integrity of? Let's not put milk. Fruit Loops are not a good idea. Let's talk about like maybe a really nice lake, a beautiful pristine lake with all these like blow up donuts, and people are floating in the blow up donuts, and everyone's happy. Everyone's like passing around drinks and having fun and bouncing from one to another and doing what they do, instead of being a mud pit. So we're just going to make sure that water stays nice and crystal clear, and everything can function, everything can move properly. But when that starts to get dirty and starts to get congested, there's bits of plastic and shit floating around, and next minute you've got like these like weird parasitic fish that are coming in to eat the plastic, or like what, like I don't know, there's weird bits of like rotten meat floating around in there, and you've got piranha all of a sudden, like it's like, fuck, what's going on? And like, gotta hold your toes up. I don't know if I'm painting a picture well enough for you or not, but so at the core of it, what I'm sort of like getting to is like, there's an old paradigm of health that we've been sold where we are the victim and we're completely disempowered. But what we can do is we can start to clean the lake, and we can start to enhance cellular function. And when we enhance cellular function, when everything works properly, then they can't label it with a symptomology or a disease. Because but we don't want to treat anything, we don't want to cure anything. All we want to do is support cellular function, support cellular health. And so in the Dr. Alejandro Junger's book, he actually wrote, he said like, so because his chemistry started failing him. He's like, well, so he ended up with like his body just degenerating and chronic anxiety and depression. And so he went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, okay, so you need to take these. And he's like, but why do I need to take these? He's like, well, because that's what you need to take. And he said, but why? And he said, well, because, and he explained it in, I guess, in like some kind of a bit more like, what's the word that means kind of like specific, like medical jargon, saying this chemical and this receptor and all these things, right? And so it's not working. So you've got to take these so your body will work properly. He's like, that's not making my body work properly. That's not making my body work properly. That's providing something external of me so my cells can continue to dysfunction. And so he just like went, what? That's not it. And then he like went on this journey of health and understanding the cell, and then talking about mucus and seeing where all the toxins come from, and then how you can support removing the mucus from your body, and yeah. But he never really spoke to the elimination pathways, which is what I'm getting to. Anyway, so in this new world, our cells are speaking to us. All of our symptomology can basically be related back to our endocrine function, and at the keystone of our health is our adrenals. And I'm sure, like, it's a bit of a what's the word? It's a bit of a what are those things where you like have fad? It's a fad. It's one of those fad words, you know what I mean? But but more than that, it's a serious thing that's being recognized. But like it's just another half truth. I'm not giving us the full truth. So what's going on is not the fact that we need to take hormone replacement therapy. Well, actually, it's another conversation. There are bridges that some people require in chronic conditions, and I don't want to ignore that. And in the same way with certain medications and certain supplementations and these kinds of things. But what we're talking to is like you're getting all these people that are saying, "Oh, I've got adrenal exhaustion." So what are they doing? They're going and getting something that is like adrenocomplex from like Medivita or whatever it is, like understanding that whole pharmaceutical company is the nutraceutical company, and for naturopaths and dietitians to be recognized within the spectrum of what we call health, they have to fit within a medical illusion that talks about disease and deficiency. And like their heart is in the right place, and some people do go on once they learn the university to dig deeper into some deeper truths around health and healing, and how you can actually support the body through a cleansing and regeneration process. But a lot of people just they paid a lot of money for their education, and so they expect to get what they pay for. So they're absolutely convinced that what they were told is exactly right. And anything outside of that is wrong, because universities, institutions are set up for the people and not for business models, right? So like the education from the highest places comes from spaces that don't have as good intentions as the people who are then operating the way that they're being taught. You know, I've spoken to a medical doctor, and it's like the first 2 years they spend like memorizing the body, like just memorizing it in like the most finite detail. And then from there, they start learning about what can go wrong with the cell and what drug you give it. It's like 10% of, like not even those, there's like even 10% or like maybe 10 minutes actually spent on like diet, like what people are eating. Like, do you think that if you're putting shit petrol in a car that maybe your engine's going to start to seize up? I don't know. Like, I'm just like, what I like the most about truth when you hear it is like, it relates to something else, because it's a fractal reality. There's like, everything is connected to everything else. So if it doesn't fit, you can't see it happening other places, then it doesn't really work. Like you completely pollute a pond with chemicals from overflow and from chemicals and farms and plastic and rubbish. Like, you kill the wildlife, you kill the ecosystem. Like, look at the Great Barrier Reef. Like, I'm sure there's like, I don't know, I'm sure like, I'm sure you can get what I'm saying. It's really simple. You know, like, things get polluted, and when it's toxic, things don't work. So we just have to undo the pollution. And because our internal world is a reflection of our external world, when we start to work with the internal world, then that means the outside world should fix. And if you think about what that would mean, not putting chemicals into your body, not consuming chemicals, not consuming processed foods with numbers in them, and numbers are antibiotics, right? So numbers are preservatives for the most part. Coloring's other chemicals of as well, but lots of preservatives. And preservatives are antibiotics because they stop bacteria from breaking down food. It's funny that they should write antibiotic 232, you know. So you've got an immune system, you've got a lymphatic system, and there's got nature's janitors that live in there. There's bacteria, fungus, and parasites, they all live in there, right? And viruses, they all live in there. Viruses don't really live, but they are in operation, they're communication mechanisms. Okay, Whoa, it's got a little bit lost. So, oh yeah, that's what I was saying, right? So then you're eating these you're eating these antibiotics, right? You're eating these antibiotics all the time, and then like how does a compost toilet work? You know what I mean? Like if you were to go and tip bleach in your compost toilet, like your shit's just gonna build up. Like the bacteria needs to be alive in there because that's what breaks it down. So like when they give you antibiotics when you're going through some kind of healing crisis and you've got all these like little microbes in you that are supporting like the breaking down of these like congestion and coming out of your body and feeding on this waste, this toxic waste, then what does your body do? It's like left with three mechanisms: fat, water, and calcium. So you've got this really, really acidic medium that bacteria and fungus and parasites were breaking down, and you take away the natural enzymatic action of breaking those pH 3 acids down to something that's a bit more around a pH 6 that's more movable by the body, and then your body's like stuck in a system. What do I do? It's like it will rush a heap of water to that space. And the next minute you've got this like freaking like pneumonia or something like that, some like ridiculous like lung congestion issue. Right, and it's like stuck in there, and they're not letting it come out, and they won't even like let you sit up and get it out. You're like, lay there. or calcium, like your body just all of a sudden uses heaps of calcium. It's like the reason that you see aortic aneurysms, because they're like sticking chemo straight in the aorta, and it goes straight in there. It's a 1.5 pH acid, and your body throws heaps of calcium at it, thins the walls, and then it goes spastic, and then you see an aneurysm. Or fat, it can lay down a heap of fat. And then like you never really healed anything, or you created as another fatty layer and calcified layer that you're gonna have to visit one day in sometime in the future. But if you don't get given appropriate information and truth to start supporting your body, then the same thing will happen, and you'll do the same thing again, and it'll lay down another layer. And then one day, all the antihistamines that you had in your life that were like drying out your nasal passages and like not letting that run out because you've got your brain's trying to drain. You know, you probably don't cry enough, so it can't come out your eyes. So it's like, because we've been told not to cry, so it's like coming out your nose. And they're like, no, take antihistamines, or take, you got a cold or flu, take Codral, you know, like that's what you're going to do. So it dries all this out. And what are you doing? You're like locking all of this like acidic waste from that lake that's trying to like drain, trying to take the plug out and let it all out, just have a bit of a blow off valve and let out some of that toxicity. And we just lock it in there. And then, you know, like 10 years time, like there's a tumor, or there's macular degeneration, or your teeth are falling out of your head because it's giving away calcium from your teeth. Or you've got like tonsillitis and they cut your tonsils out, and now you've got no way to, not only way, but it's the main septic tank of your brain. It's the main septic tank of your brain. Like, how does it get out of your head if you remove the septic tank? Can you think about that? Like, so say it's like, oh, we found something in your lymph nodes. We got to